Okay. So, good morning, Deborah.
Morning.
Hello. It's one of the interesting things here is that we talked about doing this Q&A, and a lot of people have heard me mention you, and they asked about what you've done and how you've done it and that sort of thing. And when I mentioned that, would you like to do this? And you said, yeah, affirmations work. I didn't fully understand until you explained it why you get so excited about that. So maybe start with that, how you came
Yeah.
to that.
The affirmation.
Yeah.
So I had several recommendations on yourself. So I checked out your podcast and had a listen, and I listened to the podcast you had with Sean, and just hearing him talk through the process of him buying a business. And I did an affirmation that day and said, I'm so excited I get to do my very own interview with Bruce to talk about my multiple deals. And it's such an amazing feeling. And yeah, I haven't closed anything just yet, but yeah, here I am.
Here you am, and
Yeah,
you're close. You're close.
I am. I'm very close. Very
Yeah,
close.
you're close. And as we talked about, you want to do another one of these after you close that. So we'll do
That's
that. So,
the deal.
okay. So how about a little bit about your background?
Background is in recruitment.
Hmm.
Um, in hospitals, so doctors and consultants. That was my main area anyway. And then I guess that's what I thought perhaps it might be easier to do healthcare in terms of rolling up with care homes. And yeah, I guess that's where I
Okay.
am.
And we talked about this recently, but when you decided to do that, you also decided to go all in on that process. So why don't you talk about what you did with respect to your job, your home, et cetera, et cetera.
So gave up the job, sold my house actually. So I needed to make sure I had enough to get me through in terms of the processes with QLA. And yeah, it's a sacrifice I had to make. Would I do it again? 100% yes. Do times get tough? Yeah, very tough because you're
Hmm.
seeing the money depleting, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. I think sometimes it's necessary to put yourself in a position where there is a level of real discomfort, because it does force you to focus, and the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And oftentimes, as you've found, things happen, right? Things that you expect to happen in a time frame don't happen. Oftentimes it takes longer.
yeah,
Oftentimes your available funds that you thought would last a whole lot longer don't last as
yeah,
long. So the this is about you, not me, but that's exactly the process I went through. I quit a corporate job. I sold my home, cashed in my 401k, um, and then dwindled down at the lowest to $40. So, I hope you don't
okay,
get to
I'm not
40
quite there,
pounds. Yeah,
but
I hope you don't get there. But yeah, okay. So, I wrote
but it
some
keeps me up at
questions.
night. It
Yes, it
does.
does.
It,
It does when you
yeah.
see that happening. So so after we talk a little bit about you, there were a couple people that asked some questions, and I'll go through those questions and
Yeah,
let you
sure.
answer those. So we talked about your background. So why is this whole process important to you? This acquisition journey here, and maybe what that turns into with respect to your why.
It's important because I know there's a better way to do this.
Hmm.
I ran my own business. I always have. It didn't make sense what I was doing. I'm building something from the bottom. I'm clamoring my way up. I'm hiring people. People are letting me down. I'm having to rehire again. The costs are going up. It just doesn't make sense for me to get from here to there in the time frame that I have to live the life that I want with what I'm doing. It just something wasn't adding up. And I'd always listen to, various entrepreneurs and people that have the wealth that I want. And sometimes they would say things, I built this from the bootstraps up, but I know you didn't. I know there's a piece in there that I'm
Hmm.
missing. And that's what I found with this process with you. It's the banks, other people's time, and the bank's money. And they've got money to sell. I want to buy the money and I want to make them a return on their investment. And that is for me to buy a business. How that process works is what we've uncovered with you and how you've taught us in the sessions. So that's it. It's important to me to live a good life, a life that I deserve. I've seen my mum struggle with a lot of us. She was also an entrepreneur that worked very, very hard every single day, with not much of a father around either. And she did very well for herself. And then we completely lost everything. And that's when everything went downhill. So it's just making sure that I want to create wealth, keep wealth, and just make sure I have the right people around as well in terms of the board of directors to make sure you make the right choices. One thing I did notice about my mum is that she didn't really have much in terms of guidance and who to ask for help. And I think if she had a better team around in terms of having the chairman, the CFO, then perhaps things may not have gone as they did.
Yeah,
I like nice things, Bruce. My shoe collection has been behind me in some of these calls, so I've got expensive.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
There's a bit of vanity in there.
Yeah, and this is not a process I invented. I learned from someone who was a mentor and is still a mentor to me, and he ended up using a process that goes way, way back. As well. It's been refined, but absolutely. So talk about, if you would, talk about that process kind of from the beginning, is how you figured out what the idea was, how you put together your board of directors, and that process.
So when it clicked, okay, this is what we need to do. I'm here and I need to get there. The first thing, yes, was building the team. To find the chairman first and making sure that was someone that has the experience, has the weight, has the knowledge, has the reputation of how these things work. And I believe that your chairman should be someone, not that I'm scared of my chairman, but I do listen to what he says, and, scheduling a call with him isn't, I'm sat here, what's the word I'm looking for? It's something that I prepare for, because I understand that his time is very limited. He's got a lot of knowledge and I need to make sure I execute things properly. So I found the chairman, and then I found my CFO. And then after the chairman, it kind of became a bit easier to bring the others on board. The legal was a little bit tough, as they tend to have a lot of legal questions. So that took me the longest. The healthcare specialist was slightly easier. I was able to have discussions with regards to things that I understood. They understood. I think the process took me around maybe 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, not long, right?
No.
Could it be done quicker? Sure. Have some people taken a lot longer? Yeah. And, one of the things you mentioned quite a while ago, probably hard for you to remember this, is that in the beginning, a lot of this, you were, as you said, a quote, scared little lamb.
I was a scared little lamb. I think I would have got my board quicker had I not been so fearful. But as soon as I sent the first message out, my chairman was like, yeah, sure, let's grab a call. And I thought, oh, shit.
And then we'll talk about it, but then you went to eventually motherfucker mode, as you described it.
Oh no, I'm motherfucker mode now. I still respect obviously my chairman, my team, but with everybody else, with the banks, the law firms, it's vendors, it's motherfucker 2.0. Yes.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned is you prepared for the discussions with your chairman. And what's important to remember about that is that, and you probably understood this pretty well, that whole team is judging you too. They're going to look to see, do you prepare? Do you execute? Do you do what you said you were going to do? Those things. And ultimately, tons of people don't use their board. and they don't use their board because they're afraid that they'll think the board thinks they're stupid. Well, if you don't use your board, you are stupid. But I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things you've done pretty effectively, particularly with your chairman. Particularly when you got to the process of banks, where you said,
Yeah.
"I don't really know what I'm doing, but I just keep doing it, and I use my board." Right?
Honestly, even till today, I had a meeting yesterday with the bank, and I still don't know what I was doing in that room. We
Hmm.
were in a massive boardroom on the top floor, lovely terrace, and he said, I'm sorry we're in this massive room, but this was the only boardroom available. It was incredibly intimidating, the boardroom. And just like for a second, I thought, how the fuck did you get here?
Yeah.
Like, is someone gonna jump out and say, surprise? It's very, yeah, I do have moments like that where I stop. But back to what you said about the chairman and the rest of the team, I respect them a great deal.
Hmm.
They don't know me from Adams. They don't
Hmm.
know they don't know me at all. I could be anybody. They were happy to listen. They were happy to jump on board and offer their expertise. The amount of work they've put in, I would not be able to pay them for that.
Hmm.
What's important is that I do listen. If I say I'm going to call my chairman at 1:30, at 1:30 on the dot, his phone rings.
Yep.
That's with the rest of my board as well, with vendors. And I've heard it more than once from vendors and my board members. Deborah, when you say you're going to call us at 1:30, you call us at 1:30 on the dot. So it's important that I create that atmosphere, that I do respect your time. In the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing in terms of like the accounts and stuff. Now I kind of understand it a bit
Hmm.
better. So I try and take over what it is they were doing before and present it in a way that I know they would like it presented. So to make the things a lot easier for them. So before it was calls, maybe every other day. Now it's maybe once or twice a week, because they now know, okay, she's got the hang of it. I know what questions they're going to ask, especially my accounting and tax board member. I know what questions he
Yeah.
asks. So
Yeah.
all the questions. So I make sure that those are all answered.
And
But
after a while, they're the same questions, right?
yeah, they're the same questions, and it gets you thinking as well. Like,
Yeah.
actually, I should be asking these questions because it's important that I know. Because if that's not here, then this is a no-go. So it's just you. Not that you have to be your board, but you need to work with them as well. And if there's things that I don't understand, I just say it point blank.
Just
Listen, that's gone over my head. I have no idea what you're talking about.
yeah,
And
and they're
explain
happy
it.
to explain it. They're happy to explain it. The one thing you mentioned was that they all comment that you're on time.
Yes.
It's important, but it also shows you that most people are not on time.
Yes, that's correct.
So the fact that they mention it shows that you stick out because of that, and they take notice of that. They
And I take notice of it too when I've got a
Yeah.
call with a bank and they're 6 minutes late. What
Yeah.
else are you going to be late with? So
Yeah.
it's I like to be on time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's important, The so because I want to remember this. One of the things you mentioned was you sat in that conference room, and you said, "Wow, what the fuck am I doing here?" Right?
Yeah, literally.
And one of the things that you did when you visited prospects that was really powerful was
Yes.
that you would sit in your car and you would get in the mindset of, okay, I own 60 of these or whatever the
Yes.
number is. And that changed things for you, I think, right?
It
Yeah.
did, 100%. I would
Yeah.
close my eyes. I would switch the ignition off, because my car does not sound like a Rolls Royce. I'd imagine that I was parked in my brand new Rolls Royce Wraith, just coming to visit a vendor, and I just think, okay, you own 60 care homes. And then the conversation would just change. Whereas when I go there scuttling around, worried what's this vendor going to ask me? They're going to know that I don't own any of these.
Hmm.
This is the wrong way to go into these situations. So it's just important to center yourself as to where you'd be coming from if you owned more than one of these things.
Hmm.
And I've said this several times on the call. It is a big task in terms of getting a deal closed, but you only need to close one. Once you've closed one, then the rest of it happens. It's like, I mean, I've worked in sales, and as soon as you've made one sale, it's like the floodgates open. All of a sudden, it's not difficult for you anymore because you've overcome that hurdle. There's another hurdle over there, but you don't know about that one yet. But this one here, once you've done, I know once one deal is done, the rest of it should come much.
And you teach yourself it's doable, right?
Yes.
So after you assembled your board, then and I assume you did that through primarily LinkedIn. Is that
LinkedIn? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then you wanted to assemble the professionals, the accountants and lawyers. So
Yes.
How was that process for you?
Oh, Bruce, you got to give me a second. So boards assembled. Okay, now we're going to start speaking to people from the outside that, you know, they're quite scary, like talking to lawyers and accountants. I don't need to tell them about my dreams and why I'm building this thing. It's not a board member. These people want to get paid, and they want to get paid ASAP. So I found the lawyers easier to talk to in the beginning. So I started with the smaller firms and just explained to them what the structure was, what we're thinking of doing. Obviously, I had some tips from you in terms of how to talk about the private equity model. And going through a lot of these calls, even the smaller firms leading up to the medium and the big ones, there is a little bit of an attitude with some of these lawyers and the way they quiz you and ask you questions. I found that I was getting swung around with questions and queries. And then that was motherfucker mode point one, when I just said, wait, hang on. I said, you're getting too ahead of yourself here. I said, I don't even know if I want to do business with you first and foremost. So let's just wind it in and let me ask the questions. And those words came out of my mouth, and I didn't actually know they'd come out of my mouth. I think at that moment I realized, you've sacrificed so much to even get to this point. I'm not going to allow anybody to speak to me in this way, especially since I'm trying to buy your services. I'm going to pay for your services. I'm not asking for this for free. And I'm doing what anybody else would do. For example, the private equity model, they don't pay their fees. And then things just started to change. I started to take control of the narrative, the conversation, because then I realized, hang on, Deborah, you're doing this process, and I was kind of rumbling and just getting on with it, as opposed to thinking, wait, hang on a second, take one step back, Deborah. This is actually a real business you're building here. You're actually going to close deals, and you're actually going to pay them money. This is not just a process. You need to remember that this is actually going to happen. And things just started to change. I started to ask them about, have they ever done an IPO before? One of them said they hadn't. I said, well, then in that case, I'm going to have to get another law firm. You're going to have to be second chair. I was saying things that I heard on other conversations and just repackaged it and put it into the next conversation to make it sound like I knew what I was talking about. I didn't have a fucking clue what I was talking about. I just rumbled along. And then one said, okay, yes, I guess we can do 100% discount. And then I used that to go to the next one and the next one. And then the one that I essentially ended up with was the one that I actually wanted. They had very good experience in the deals that I want to do. In terms of the structure, they understood it completely. I asked them about previous transactions they've closed and what that process was like. I don't want to be fobbed off of any junior partners. I want you to make sure that you're on the job. If I email my lawyer today at 12:57 here, by 12:59, he would have responded with something.
Yeah.
He is super duper fast, and that's what you pay for. So it's important when you are picking a law firm that, yes, you want the big shiny one, but you need to make sure the big shiny one actually treats you the way you want to be treated, and they're there to support you. I feel very supported by my law firm as well. So once I got them, I thought, okay, so now let's do the accountants. The accountants were very prickly, even with my newfound motherfucker mode. They weren't trying to be idiots. They just did not understand. They were trying to put it into a box and couldn't understand why and how I was going to pay on a success-oriented basis and not pay any fees if it falls over. So I had to explain to them in a roundabout way that if 5 deals stand up and 2 fall down with 25% success, would you agree that all your fees would add up? And they said yes. I said, so at some time in the universe, your fees will all add up together, right? They said, yeah. I said, okay, so that's what we're doing. And they said, okay, that seems to be okay, because they weren't able to get over the, what was that word called again? They said, it's like not being biased and
Yeah,
and
the contingency, or
yeah, something like
you know,
that.
our ethics don't allow us to do success, you know, but you're not asking for that, you know.
Yeah, so I
You're
just
not
had to
asking.
structure
Yeah.
it. And I understood they weren't being like that because my accountant and tax partner, as amazing as he is, he does ask, a lot of questions and to make sure things are in order in terms of compliance and tax. And it's probably better that he's like that because there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that people
Yeah.
miss. So
How important was them seeing the profiles of your board to adding to your credibility and getting them?
it was very important. I made it very clear that we're not going to bring you, we're going to bring you fully funded deals.
Hmm.
We're going to make sure that we've done our own internal due diligence. So we make sure that everything stacks up. The debt service coverage is where it needs to be. So whatever we bring, please know it's already gone through a process of severe vetting with the board. They were very happy with that, which at least alleviates any questions they have about, okay, they're going to bring us deals hanging on a string. So it's important that it fits within a criteria. They know the criteria, and yeah, they're
Yeah.
happy to.
And once again, to your 60 care homes, you weren't bringing them one deal. You were going to bring them a series of
Yeah,
transactions, which is a revenue
yeah,
stream, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. So you
It's important
completed
to be
that.
enthusiastic as well. Like your enthusiasm, you have to be enthusiastic
Yeah.
on the calls with these guys.
Yeah.
So
And confident, right? You
yeah,
know, and one of the things that people, when they start this process, they're not used to interviewing others. They're used to be interviewed themselves. So
correct.
to keep in your head, hey, I'm interviewing you.
Yes,
You know, so basically, I get to ask the questions, and you turned off people, you know, when that wasn't going together very well in the beginning, right? Just don't have
yeah,
time.
I have. I
Yeah.
just said I have time. I've got 5 minutes for this call. We need to wrap this up. And I kind of would do that in the beginning to kind of shake them a little bit because I
Yeah.
know they're going to try and come at me. They've had these calls and these conversations with many people, and a lot of them have had these types of calls,
Yeah.
success oriented fees. So it was important that right off the bat, I kind of shake them slightly so they're
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
gear.
And then that brought you to talking to banks, financial institutions, and which is a fun one. You know, it's
That's
funny when
motherfucker point 3.0, that one.
3.0, right?
Yeah.
Because what people don't understand is they have a product to sell, just like anybody else. Just happens to be capital.
Correct.
And most people are like, well, I hope they lend me the money. What if they don't lend me the money? Whereas if you said, okay, I'm going to go in the grocery store and buy a quart of milk or whatever it was, what if they don't sell me the milk? What if they don't sell me bread? What am I going to do? It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah,
But people
exactly.
think that way when they come to a financial institution. So how was that process and for you?
The banks, that's a
Yeah.
completely different animal. So you've just got over, winning the round with the law firms and the accounting firms. The bank is a completely different animal. This one is constantly moving, constantly changing. There are egos involved. They don't want to give you anything in stone. They want to ask you all the questions under the sun. And because of your relationship with the bank in terms of you as an individual, going to the bank, open up a credit card, overdraft, we need to see your credit report, we need to see this. That's the avenue that you're operating from. And it's wrong. They've got a product to sell. Their job is to sell money. My job is to buy it, and I'm paying it back to you with interest. So you need to get money out of the door. So again, the banks want to know, who are you? What do you do? Have you got any of these already? No, no, and no. They see the board. Yeah, sometimes it works. Sometimes you can just get someone, and this is the thing, you can say the right thing to the bank or the person you're talking to, and they turn around and say no. They just don't fucking like you, and
Hmm.
it it's fine. You will find someone that will say yes. Um, I would say the banks, it is more of a relationship. It's more for them to understand what it is you're doing. So you're transaction oriented, how much business you want to bring them. A lot of the times they would say, okay, yeah, you want to do this, but you need to put, let's say, 30% cash in. And the response is, well, look, if I'm trying to move at this rate, exactly where do you want me to find 30% cash per deal? It's not possible. So you're going to have to do it in this way. And some of them were happy with the seller's note as equity. Some of them flat out said no.
Hmm.
Some of them I went back to some time after and they said yes. So it is very important to not count any bank out. Sometimes things change. The flavor of the month changes all the time. I do follow a lot of the banks on LinkedIn, and they're always putting out, we've just appointed a new head of healthcare or head of this who's now instructed, we've got this amount of money to spend in the space, you've just been allotted this amount. So it's important to know what is happening with the bank, and upon speaking to them and showing them, okay, this is the deal that we have, so we'd send a deal snapshot. Or no, before I sent any deals, so I'd say, look, these are the kind of transactions that we want to bring. Does this sit in your parameters? Does this look good? Some would say yes, and some would say no. So it's,
And you had
but
three or
again,
four questions that you asked early on to kind of pre-qualify the bank, whether that's are you lending in our space, what the
yes,
EBITDA multiples are, and then I think in the initial calls, you went through that explanation of seller equity, and that's
yeah,
important for a couple of reasons. One, to keep the previous management, if they're any good, in the
yes,
deal, which mitigates some risk. But it also, if they will count it as equity, counts as your equity. Not all banks, but
yeah.
some banks, right?
Not all banks, but
Yeah.
some of them do. And I think the ones that said that we don't consider seller's note as equity, we were kind of able to get around that at some point when we said, okay, well, the sellers are actually staying in the deal. They won't have any control of
Hmm.
cash flow and won't make any commercial decisions, but they're here just as intellectual capital. How does that sit?
Hmm.
Okay, that could work to some extent. Perhaps we could do that. There's always room to wiggle if you get a bank that, if you've got someone that you're talking to in a bank that wants to work with you, no matter what it is that they've got on their website or on their sheets, you can always find a way to do a deal. It's very important to create and cultivate those relationships with those
Yeah. And
in the
it's
banks.
important to remember from the beginning of all these discussions, professionals, banks, that you're in a negotiation. There's nothing wrong with them asking for personal guarantees. And you had an experience with one bank where first you had to have them answer the question of would they consider the seller's equity my equity? And I think he went away and maybe the next morning came back, maybe it was that same day, and said yes. And
Yes, it did.
then he asked, or you asked about personal guarantee. Maybe he asked it because I doubt you would introduce that. And you said no, and then he came
Yeah,
back and said okay, right?
that was it. And I went back to the chairman. I said, they're asking for this, and he said, well, you tell them fuck no, we're not doing that. And I didn't say that, but I said no. But
Yeah,
they're going to ask, and if you want to offer them everything on a plate, they're going to take it.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
how it is.
Yeah, they absolutely, and but a lot of people don't appreciate that just because they ask a question, that they can't say no to that question. Same thing with prospects. Same with all of those. So really important to remember. The At some point, you went through a course. I think that I put together.
Yes, I
Then
do.
you joined group coaching
Yes.
as well. And what was helpful in that process?
The information in the online course you had was very easy to read, very easy to understand, and very easy to implement. Those are the very important things. And in terms of how much information was in each part, it wasn't too much and it wasn't too little. It was enough to get it and to, okay, let's keep it moving now. Obviously the group coaching helps a lot more, because at least that way you're being held accountable, you know, week by week. It's like, shit, okay, what have we got to report this week now? It's like, oh goodness, Thursday already, it's time to do the weekly report.
Yeah.
You know, it keeps you in check. It keeps you clocking your hours. It keeps you clocking your time. And yeah, it helps bouncing ideas off of other people.
Other people, depending upon where they are. And those weekly reports are more important to you than they are for me, is to say, okay, am I making the calls? Am I doing, you know, letters, whatever else it is, and tracking your time. Okay, so at that point, you had your board, you had your professionals, you had a bunch of banks that you talked to. Some said yes, some said no, but you had 10 banks or whatever you had. You were then, I don't know if you were in motherfucker mode 4.0 at this point, but then you were talking to prospects, right? Yeah. So how was that process?
So that's when you think, okay, I've climbed the mountain, I'm at the top, I've done everything I can. Now all these vendors are going to come running to me. As soon as I contact them, they're going to want me to take their business, and they're just going to be amazing. It's going to be great. That's not what fucking happened. So started off with the letters, sent a shit ton of letters. I think maybe around 150 every couple of days. I would send. I spent a lot of money on letters. Got some good responses, got some shit responses, got told to fuck off and not to contact me again. Then I did the follow-up calls as well. That again is another minefield that I had to cold calling was quite tough in the beginning.
Were you afraid of cold calling in the beginning?
No, because I've done it before. I wouldn't say I was afraid, but it was a completely new animal. So there was a little bit of hesitancy in there with regards to questions I'd be asked. Because you've done your board, your accountants and law, and the bank, you kind of do feel like you've got a bit of wind in your sails, and you're ready to go. But as soon as you start the calls, that does get, you have to pick yourself up again after the calls.
And you've got to, a lot of times you don't get to the owner, right? You got to get through a gatekeeper.
There's a lot of gatekeepers. You have to think of ways to get through the gatekeepers. Calling on the weekends worked best for me. They would ask you, I mean, similar to my business as well. If somebody would call to ask for me, the two girls on admin would absolutely heckle them with questions like, why are you calling? Why do you need to speak to her? So I know what they're doing, because that's what was done. It's not necessary to put these calls through to me if they're trying to sell me paper, you know? So it's trying to figure out, it was just trying to be a bit ambiguous with, you know, this is something I can only discuss with the owner. It is quite sensitive. Do you know if they're available or when I can call back? Some of them would say, yeah, call back tomorrow at 11 o'clock, he'll be here. Some of them, here's his email address. Some of them, you're just not going to be able to get through. It's not possible.
Yeah,
some of the owners,
there's nothing that's personal and confidential. I've been working with him or her for 30 years, so
yeah, exactly.
Tell me exactly what you want. Yeah, and some of those work, some of those don't work, right?
Yeah. So that was one of the issues. And when this all started, this was during the start of the pandemic as well. So nobody was in the home, so getting hold of these people was literally by chance. It's a lot different now. Now it's emails that we send to the businesses, and yeah, I think that's probably something that's brought a lot more. Yeah.
One of the things I think you did was you don't want to tell the employees that you're calling to buy the business, right? Because then you're going to get a pretty cranky. If you get a call, it's not going to be a friendly call. You know, the place is a mess now. Why'd you do that? So that can always be worked to your advantage, to end up saying, well, what's this in reference to if the owner does call you back? some people leave the message. It's a question only the owner can answer. And so they may say, well, what's this question only I can answer? And we were interested in whether you would want to sell all or part of your business. That's certainly not a message I wanted to leave with your employees. So
Yeah.
they will understand that. They will understand it.
But that wasn't easier.
Yeah.
With the letters, again, I tried the letters with the white envelope. I got a blue envelope, writ it, with a gold pen, put a stamp, smaller envelope that looked a bit more like a card. So there were things that I would do with the letters, and some of the responses were good. Some of them, they just said, look, maybe you did send a letter, but I would have put it in the bin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. The emails seem to work a lot. Emails and cold calling. I was doing, as you know, like between 300 to 400 calls a day, Bruce. So
yeah. Which people hear that and they say, how's that possible? So
it is possible.
Yeah, it is possible.
When you haven't got a job and
right, when you have that much time. But not all of those calls did you get through to somebody that you wanted to talk to, right? Maybe 20%, something like that.
Correct.
Something like that. So, okay. So one of the things that you ran into along the way was that you built up a pipeline. You had a lot of deals that were out there. You had your board meeting where you decided on, I think it was four or five. Some of these we're going to go forward with, some we're not. You ended up with a deal that fell apart in due diligence. If some of this is wrong, just correct me. And then you had a deal that was a good deal. Everything was lining up with the financial institutions, et cetera, et cetera. So tell us about what happened there.
So, oh wow. Bruce, it's interesting to think about it now and smile about it, because at the time it wasn't fucking funny. It was literally my soul left my body.
Soul crushing.
Really was. It was soul crushing, and it was done in the most uncouth way. By the way, we're not selling because my daughter isn't happy with this. This is a daughter that we had no clue about.
Yeah, didn't know she was in the process, right? He's told you that, I'm making the decisions.
Yeah, and that wasn't the case.
Right.
So there was another person. So this is what flawed the deal. I also think what flawed the deal as well was the fact that the valuation and the banks take a long time. If you can get 100% seller finance, then that's always the place to go, because you don't have this process with the bank speaking to the valuation. This one is now on leave. That one is got COVID.
Okay. So you had a deal. We've talked about what happened with the board meeting, how you came down to one deal close to the goal line. Everything looks good until it didn't look good. So, and as you've said, that was a soul-crushing experience. So take us through that.
I look back now, and obviously I can smile about it now, but at the time it wasn't funny at all. I saw my life flash before my eyes. So what happened there is that there was a daughter that we didn't know about that just jumped in at the last minute and said, no, we're not holding a seller note. We want all the cash up front. That wasn't the deal to begin with. So it's just important to make sure that whoever is involved in this process, now I ask the vendor, is there anyone else that can have something to say at any point? If they do, I'd prefer them to come into this deal now and not later on down the line. And that seems to work well. So his daughter basically tanked the deal.
Yeah, which you never knew. He was making all the decisions up until that point, so you were told.
It's him and his wife that were owners of the company, and I would say, look, let's bring your wife. No, she doesn't need to be here. I make all the decisions. You can talk to me. And his daughter came in and just turned it on its head. And it's I can smile now, Bruce, but at the time I wasn't doing so good.
No.
Really
I remember that. And there were two things that kind of came, one good, one not so good, is that in your agreement you had £100,000
Yeah.
breakup fee. So, and if I remember right, the lawyer for him said, we understand that we have that obligation. But you had also, focused so heavily on that deal that you had taken away from your pipeline, right?
100%. That was the
Yeah,
biggest mistake
yeah. And
ever.
famously, you said later on, my pipeline is my lifeline.
It really is. You
Yeah.
cannot have one deal going through, even though you bring the other deals to the board and they agree, okay, let's go with this one. There's no way you should be sat there in the wind with absolutely nothing else to go on. It's
Hmm.
important to keep that pipeline going. So at the minute, we have a deal that's in due diligence, but there are still other ones hanging around in the back. And as soon as they fall off, I'm just working to bring more in, because having it going back to sellers that I'd spoken to previously and them telling me, oh, actually, we've just sold the home, or we're actually going, like, about four or five of them were like, yeah, we've sold. And this one was like, yeah, we're just signing the contract in the next couple of days, it'll be sold, you're too late now. And it was that word, the word that she said, oh, you're too late now.
Yeah.
And it just revert, like, I can hear her saying it, and it just, I'm too late, like,
A little more soul crushing. A little more soul
it was,
crushing.
it was a kick
Yeah.
when I was down.
Yeah. Now I think you swung the pendulum a little too far the other way, because then you wanted to get, I don't know what it was, 25 LOIs or something like
Yeah,
that.
and
And,
it was
and
insane.
yeah, and then it was too much the other way to say, okay, LOIs are good, but let's get some of these across the
Yeah.
goal line, certainly. So the okay, the so there were a couple. I mentioned you a few times, so there's a couple people that asked some questions. So why don't we roll through those? Some of those we've already answered.
Hmm.
Seller wants a bank guarantee for seller's financing. What is your answer?
No, it's
No.
just a straight up no.
Yeah, yeah. Some
First
of
of
these
all,
are.
do you want to do that?
Hmm.
No. If you ask your board will tell you no. Um, a way that we have structured some of the conversations is, especially when they've got ad backs, we tell them, well, you're going to have to carry a seller's note because you've got all these ad backs, and we don't know if they're really ad backs or they're actually the business expense. So you're going to have to hold them. And to be honest, if your business is doing what you say it does and it's yielding the profit that it does, and this is how we're going to pay you back, why are you asking me for a personal guarantee?
Hmm.
Um, I'm not
Especially
making
if
any
they're staying in the business, running the business.
in the
We
business.
got more
I'm
risk than you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not changing any staff. I'm not going to come in there on day one and start lifting everything up and restructuring everything. And I'm going to run this business as you were running it. So why do you need a personal guarantee? It's not going
Yeah.
to happen.
Makes sense. How and when do you introduce 100% seller finance to the seller?
Well, this is a tricky road, that 100% seller finance. You can't say that right off the back. It's
Hmm.
just, you have to put yourself in the seller's shoes. They don't know who you are. You sent them a letter, or you managed to catch them on the phone. You want them to sell you their business, and then you're telling them, I'm not going to give you any money for it. I'm going to give it to you over time. You have to work a little bit and understand what the person's motivation is to sell. That's very important.
Hmm.
Secondly, it depends on the business as well. Sometimes these business does have a little bit of debt. So for you to take 100% seller finance when they've got an £800,000 bill to pay, it's, you're not going to be able to get
Nope.
100% seller finance. So I think that's something more, that's more of a long game. And you can do it in a way that, okay, look, we're not going to give you all the cash on day one. We're going to give you, majority up front. The rest is going to be over time. And then you can kind of dial your way back a little bit. I remember listening to a seminar somewhere about someone that was in a similar situation. It was meant to be 80% seller finance and 80% bank and 20% seller
Hmm.
finance. And it turned over to be 80% seller finance and 20% bank. And that happened at the last minute, because things happen,
Yeah.
just because you have a bank doesn't mean at the last minute they're going to say, actually, we're pulling out now. Then what do? Then you have to go back to the vendor. And you would hope that in that time, you've built enough of a relationship with them for them to see, okay, this wasn't done on purpose. We're just trying to restructure the deal to make it make sense to get a sale. So I haven't gone personally to anybody and said 100% seller finance. I've just had to work and tweak the numbers and, do things a bit more gentle. You have
Yeah,
to.
and it is a process. You want to earn the trust, but you've got to look at that balance sheet to say, okay, what debt do they
Yeah.
have? If there's no debt on the business, then it's a pretty good candidate for
And they
that.
might not mind, you
Right.
ask them, "Do you want cash over up front or would you want cash over time?" Some of them, well, I don't mind cash over time. I don't need all that money up
Yeah.
front. And then that's how you enter the conversation of seller finance. But just hitting them with the 1-2 straight away,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
And typically you can end up with offering, as long as the terms work and the cash flow covers the debt service, you can offer them a higher price if the
yes,
terms are right. They okay. They do you have any banks that agree to no personal guarantee?
yes,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. Do
Simple
personal.
answer. Wasn't everyone you talked to, but you talked to
No,
enough
it
to.
wasn't.
Yeah.
But they're going to push. If I was working in the bank, would I try and push for that? Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
I would want to take everything.
Every hook you can get.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm trying to cover my ass. So
Yeah.
of course I'm gonna ask. But the answer is a lot of people that I've spoken with that are in the high net worth bracket, whenever they've got a little bit of time to explain, how did you do this? How did you get there? It's always no personal guarantees, don't give the bank any assets, and whatever interest rate they want to give you, drop it by
Hmm.
another 3% to zero. I mean, you've got companies and individuals borrowing money in excess of 200 to 300 million with an interest rate of 0.25. And the banks aren't making money in these big transactions. They're making money out of the little guys that are taking out loans with high interest rates, mortgages. So there's money available for them to sell at a very low rate with no guarantee at all. I mean, if you look at some of the stories with the banks and likes of JP Morgan, HSBC, you can see all of this all over Netflix. HSBC got dragged to court for lending, I don't know, somebody 25 million and not checking this. And so things are happening around in the banking sector that you and I will look at and think, whoa, how did they do that? But it's being done. And these are for businesses that aren't actually viable, whereas yours is. Yours is already trading. It's not brand new. There's already history in the business. The management team are staying in place. What more guarantee do you
Yeah.
want?
We bring you a strong deal. The cash flows. Debt service is covered by the cash flow to whatever percentage. The better,
So,
the more the
yeah, so,
better. Yep.
so I feel like you really have to. You've got to not bully the bank, but you really have to talk to them firmly for them to understand. Oh, okay, maybe she knows what she's talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. And
Um,
that there's going to be a string of them. What is your
yeah.
answer if the bank wants a personal guarantee from the board members?
First of all, your board members are not majority shareholders of the business, so that's a big fat no. And you told your board members that they're here basically for their experience. So you're not going to go and ask your board members to put in personal guarantees, because if you do that, you're not going to have any more board members.
Right. Right.
They just shouldn't be asking you for that
Yeah.
unless you should be majority shareholder. So no,
Yeah.
no,
And
yeah,
you brought
no.
him on telling him expressly you weren't going to do that. So to the bank,
Yeah,
if that's what you want, I wanted their wisdom and experience. I told them I didn't want their money. So if that's what you need, then
then it's
have
a
a
no.
nice day. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Got a few more, then we'll
Okay.
wrap up here. So, how was your self-esteem, self-value before and during the process? What made it change if it did change? And we've talked a lot on how important self-image, self-esteem is. That's the barometer of success. So, did you have any
Yeah.
self-esteem, self-image issues?
Um, I don't think so. I've always been confident, even when I don't know what I'm doing. Like I said, even now
Hmm.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Hmm.
It's just confidence in knowing that I know where I want to get to. I know I'm going to get there. How I'm going to get there is not really my problem. I just have to show up every day. Has my confidence increased since doing this? 100%, because there are words that I never knew before. I can calculate things now, speaking to banks, speaking to lawyers. This is all very new for me, but I think it's important. The whole basis of this is your self-esteem and confidence, because if you have that, you won't have any questions to ask. You just go and do it. You will just do it and just see what happens. If you know that you can't fail and you won't fail, you will just do it anyway. Look at the lawyers and accountants asking them for 100% success-oriented fees. I would have thought that was impossible, but it's not. It is very possible. So long as I'm following the steps and I'm listening to what Bruce has to say at my board, then, it should be fine. And I think when you speak to people that have done this process and you hear what they have to say and how they talk to the banks, like, for example, borrowing 300 million at 0.25% and not putting anything down is freaking wild to me. It just makes me feel as if my whole life I've been fucking robbed, because here are people with money and you're not charging them. So it's, yeah, I think you have to make the calls, number one. You have to put yourself in a position where you're uncomfortable. 350 phone calls a day to vendors that put the phone down on you all the time is one way to get confidence and to get thick skin, because they do tell you some things that you don't want to hear. It's just putting one foot in front of the other and just getting it done, not thinking about it and just doing it. And if you trip up or you make a mistake, then you just know what to do for next time. Like, for example, me, when I first got a vendor, I was asking him for everything under the sun. I asked him for this, that, and he didn't even respond to me. And I thought, oh no, what did
I remember that. Is that I don't know if you had a list of 60 things, but it was close to that.
It was a lot.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, first, this is a process. So, get some income statements and balance sheets. That tells you if the business made any money, right? If it didn't,
but I was asking for everything.
I
was asking for everything under the sun, and I fucked up.
Yeah,
and that's fine. But at least I did something, and I've learned.
And you learned.
Okay.
Yeah,
I shouldn't do that. I should be asking for two things and then take it from there.
Yeah, I saw a quote the other day that was, which is what you're saying. I don't know how, but I know that how is known. I don't know how, but I know that how is known. And so you may not know how to do it, but your board probably does know how to do it,
Somebody
or
knows how
you'll
to do
learn.
it.
Right.
I'll figure it out. I'll ask Bruce. I'll bump into someone in Waitrose, and they will. The thing about me is I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to reach out. I've reached out to so many people on LinkedIn. I reached out to, there was a lady that was one of the first CEOs of a bank in Tokyo. And I reached out to her and said, how did you do this? And she said, let's get a call and I'll have a chat with you. And she spoke to me for like an hour of her day. And it's interesting because you've got so much access to people that want to help you, just because they look, big and shiny with their big accolades, and they've been, they're on Wikipedia and their net worth is over this. They're still happy to talk to you and to tell you, I did it this way. This is what happened. Once you have those conversations and you're not uncomfortable, everything else becomes slightly easier. It's making sure you have a good system of people. You don't have to, obviously I would love for her to be my mentor, but number one, she doesn't have the time. But a phone call every now and again is enough for me. She's introduced me to people in banking. She's introduced me to, I've got this law firm. Obviously the law firm she introduced me to said no, they're not even going to start without a retainer of, I think like 400,000. No.
Yeah, and things change over time. There may be a point that she would want to do something with you. It's hard to say, but that's okay.
Things take time. Sometimes you're on square one. You're already thinking about what am I going to do in square 100. You're not going to know till you get there. You're not going to know till you make the calls, till you speak. When you first speak to the lawyers and accountants, when I first listened to your tapes, the course that you had, I was really looking for something to tell me how to do it, to tell me, okay, when you call, you need to say this. Like, you had the script, but it's not my script, it's your script.
Right.
So I can't say that and sound natural. It doesn't sound natural. I wanted it written out like, okay, what if they ask me this? You're not going to know till you do it. And when you do it, that's when the question that you've got is answered. It's in the action. So you just have to get it done.
Yeah.
And your confidence will
And your
change.
confidence, right? And a lot of that answering of the question is how you answer that question. I don't mean the words as much as how confident you are. You know, when you're asked, well, how many of these have you done? A lot of
None.
people go through an explanation of, well, because of this and this, as opposed to none. Looked at a
No.
lot,
And
turned them
have
all
a
down.
silence.
Maybe yours will be
Yeah.
different. I'm hoping it is. You know,
I
oh,
give them one-word answers. You know, so how many care homes do you have? I don't have any, and I'm quiet. And then they're like, "Oh, okay." And then they talk about something else. The minute I start explaining, and you
Yep.
know, yeah, but you know this, and I did this in the past, and that, it's got fuck all to do with you how many I have.
Yeah.
All you should be interested in is if I've got the money to pay for it. That's it. So whether I've got 1, 2, or 5. It's really of no use. I find that vendors ask you questions that they think they should be asking. You know, so how many of these do you have? None. They don't have a response for that response because it's not a question that they would ask. They just think they should ask.
should
When
ask.
you ask,
You know,
"Do you have
one
any
of
questions?"
those is, well, how much are you going to pay me for this? I don't know if I'm going to pay you anything.
Yeah,
haven't
but I
looked
don't
at
know
it. I haven't looked at any financials. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
a deal we're interested in doing. Right? Okay. What were your top 3 moments? I don't know if you had 3 moments when you thought, quote, I quit. Why do I want to live this way? If you ever felt that way.
No.
No.
Because-
Yeah, okay.
Said I
What were your top 3
expensive pay.
moments that you remember best high on the mountaintop due to the process?
High on the mountaintop was one I would say was yesterday, being in that massive boardroom. I felt really good then. The other one would have
Even
been
though you had a moment when, what am I doing here? Right?
yeah, but that's the thing about your inner dialogue, isn't it?
Yeah.
1 minute, yeah, this is amazing, and then you self-sabotage. Oh no, but what the fuck am I doing here? I shouldn't be
Yeah.
here. Oh my god.
And then you throw that, hopefully you throw that thought away and say, okay, enough of that.
Yeah.
Let's get back to
That's
here I
how
am.
But
Yeah.
it's still, you know, you've still got that person on your shoulder telling you, "Oh, what are
Yeah.
you doing here? You're not supposed to be here."
Weeds in the garden, right? Negative
Exactly.
thoughts, weeds in the garden, pull them out. Okay, so that was a big
That was
one.
one of them. The first LOI getting signed
Yeah.
was another one. I would say that was yeah, that was really good.
How about your chairman when he said yes, no?
Yeah, that was very good. That was
Yeah.
also because you've got someone that now all of this thing that you've just discovered, you've gone on to Bruce Whipple's podcast, you bought his course, you paid for it. Now you're implementing this in the outside world with actual people. So you think, shit,
This isn't theoretical anymore.
no,
You
like
know?
I'm actually roping people into this process now.
Yeah.
So, oh my God, he believes in me. And, you know, that's one thing to understand about all of this is a process that works. It's not like you're trying to sell them, I don't know, a bridge that doesn't exist. It works, you know. And I think if you get someone of a chairman caliber that believes in what you're doing and what you've got to say, and they say, okay, yeah, I'll take a punt. I think this is great. Let's do this. And he sometimes is more enthusiastic than I am.
Yeah,
You know, and
yeah,
I think,
yeah.
oh wow.
Yeah, they and a lot of people get hung up on, I don't have any money. They're going to ask me for personal guarantees. And your chairman was like, no, we're not
Look,
doing that.
Amazon set up with no money. I think
Yeah.
Facebook, they were still in college. A lot of some of the best stories that I've heard are people that didn't have a pot to piss in. The podcast, not the podcast, sorry, the YouTube clip you sent me yesterday of Brian Allen, like his mortgage was defaulting every single
14
month.
times, right? 14 times.
89 days overdue because he was paying other people. So no, you don't need money. You really don't. And these
Yeah.
banks will give you the money if you're able to present them with a deal that fits in their parameters. You've got the right team talking for you. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's the process
absolutely.
that works.
What was his last question? Well, actually, you answered this one. Do you have any current businesses to run? How do you do that? Where were managers, directors in place, or did you find them? Do you use a dashboard and KPIs? Well, you jumped in the deep end of the
I
pool.
jumped in the deep end of the pool. I shut
Yeah,
everything down. The process of finding someone to manage it probably would have stressed me out a little bit more.
yeah,
Um, yeah, this is what I'm doing now, 100%.
and it certainly sharpens your focus, right? You know,
It
it
does. It
sharpens
really
your
does.
focus. Okay. So, what parting words, advice?
Um, Parting words and advice, I would say, is to focus more on your self-esteem
Hmm.
and building your confidence. And in the report that you send us, have you done anything outside of your comfort zone? I think that's very important to take as seriously as what you're doing in terms of pushing your acquisitions forward. Um, Even if it's something like reaching out to someone on LinkedIn and just
Hmm.
saying, look, I'm in this business and I'd be really grateful to have a chat with you if you've got a spare minute of your time. And the person says yes. And he's like, oh, shit. So it's just making sure that you're surrounding yourself with things and reminders as to where it is you're going. It's very easy to get lost in thought as well in this process, and it is tough. It's not
Yeah, it
easy.
is tough. It is tough.
It's
Yeah,
tough. It's mentally and physically draining. I don't know how many times I've woken up at night in cold sweats.
yeah,
It can be quite difficult. Your affirmations are very important to do, and not just saying them, but actually feeling them and smelling the leather of the car. You can almost taste the salt in the air on your brand
hmm,
new 100-foot yacht. Like, it's important to put flavor in that and to make it as wild and as real as possible to get that feeling as well. And like Bruce mentioned to you, anytime I go into these meetings, I close my eyes for a second and I just think, okay, I've got 60 of these bad boys. Who are you now? And
yeah,
then I open my
yeah.
eyes and then I go and then I talk. And yeah, when I leave the meeting, I'm like, fuck, whew, that was that was close.
Yeah.
But they never ask me. They never ask me, so how many of
No,
these do you have?
a
How many of
lot
these
of
do you
times the questions that you imagine don't get asked. And so
They
it's
don't.
all, worry 95% of the time that shit doesn't happen. It just doesn't.
And the same way you ask me, how many of these do I have? You're responsible for lending limits up to maybe 10, 15 million. How many
Hmm.
millions do you have?
Hmm. Hmm. How
So
many
let's,
how many that you've looked at have you taken to the credit committee and gotten through? Um,
these are questions.
oh, well, maybe I'm not talking to the right person here, you know? They
And that
absolutely.
thing changes things.
Yeah.
But I think it's self-esteem, it's confidence, it's your affirmations, it's just making sure that you're not
And taking
spending.
action, right?
You've got
And
to take
taking
action.
action. Yeah.
You've got to be accountable for your time. You can't
Yeah.
sit there messing around. And if you don't want to do it, do you know what? It's fine. Don't do it, because there's people like me that do want to do it. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. It is not for everybody. Well,
no,
I
it's not.
appreciate this. I know you have a meeting this afternoon, your time that you got to get to. So, but it was good. You didn't have to do this. There's no question in my mind you're going to be successful at this, Deborah.
Thank
There's
you.
just no question. So, good. Well, carry on.
I will.